Welcome back to another film review. My name's Rocco. We do metaphysical film reviews over here. That's what's about to happen for a really cool film called Queer, starring Daniel Craig, which I was not expecting what just happened. Let me break it down for you as best as I can. First off, I literally just finished watching it. The first part was really a Bohemian Rhapsody, Dionysian story of indulgence. And I would say that the film starts perfectly, just like the character was starting in their journey. In a debacle, consumed with seeking pleasure for the physical and from the material world. He's a queer guy, a gay guy living in Mexico in the 1950s. Seems like he's pretty much an alcoholic, smoking and drinking nonstop and hunting handsome young men that he could enrapture himself with and quench his sexual thirst. It's pretty much the surface level of the story that it starts out with. We see that he's a writer, we don't really know much else, but he ends up seeking ayahuasca, grandmother, la madre ayahuasca, which I have worked with more than one time and benefited from tremendously, from specifically the Shipibo lineage. I've sat with two different maestros of this incredible plant medicine with such reverence, and although it's depicted in here as, like they say, it's witchcraft and stuff like that, my testimony for it is that it is the medicine of the Christos. If you hear the word Christ and all you hear is Jesus, just know that Yeshua is my master teacher, and I don't call him Jesus because I think that's part of the trauma of what happened in his story, and that's the raping of a Hebrew shaman's true story that got basically pillaged and recontextualized by Roman Catholic Christian imperialism, which is what we got as the white Jesus. But that is not my understanding of him, and he's my primary master teacher. This story is of the Christ, the Christos, and the Christos losing itself in the material world, and that attempt to satisfy and satiate one's material pleasures through the senses of the body until they stumble upon the mystical medicine path, and through that temptation of seeking a drink, maybe a hallucinogenic or a psychedelic. But in the story, he keeps framing it as telepathy, and even that to me stands out as this is a soul who has reached the extent of intellectualism. The Greek god Dionysus is really, from my guerrilla style education, it's the god of, which a god, it's a demiurge reference to the highest archetype of being indulgent. It is the god of drink, wine, and pleasure. Don't quote me, I'm not a Greek historian. But yeah, that's kind of my overview. Let's get into some of the details. So what I'm about to give you is my testimony, and through this film of Queer, Christ consciousness through an altered lens. The story follows William Lee, played by Daniel Craig, wandering like a Gnostic seeker through 1950s Mexico City, drowning in material indulgence, drugs, sex, booze, and yet starved spiritually. His pilgrimage towards telepathic awakening via this ayahuasca yahe thing that he keeps hearing about is a quest for the archetypical divine communion beyond the material world of samsara and the satiation of the flesh through seeking bodily pleasures. The climactic jungle ceremony with Dr. Cotter's brewing becomes a kind of sacrament, a hallucinogenic experience, a communion, an ego dissolution, and metaphorically a baptism into Christ conscious union awareness, and literally meets the physical human friend that he went there with in a merger. Number two, ego death versus material illusion. Lee's self-destructive cycle, utilitarian sex with younger men, opiate reliance, mirrors the old ego body desperately grasping at worldly sustenance. Eugene, the kind of second male lead in this, the guy that Daniel Craig's character falls in love with, his cryptic mantra, "I'm not queer, I'm disembodied," a kind of poetic inversion of Christ eschewing the flesh, shatters Lee's grasp on identity, shoving him towards surrender, not satisfaction. 3. Shamanic metaphysics, sacred eroticism. The film is just drenched in shamanic symbolism, snake motifs, jungle ritualism, telepathy, which is the evolution of intellectualism, and this story depicts this character as somehow has all of his bills paid intellectual, marking a passage from the ego-mind identity to the collective consciousness via La Madre plant sacraments. Erotic scenes become mystical instruments, not titillation, although they start like that. Sex becomes both the portal and the altar for a transformative transcendence. And a little bit on that piece, if you're watching this film, the first half of it just seems like a raunchy gay movie. This guy's just gay, and he just wants to fuck dudes. That's what's the movie about so far. We've been watching for 60 minutes. It's about this alcoholic white dude in Mexico in the 50s just trying to fuck dudes. Not what the movie actually ends up being about. 4. Narrative as Gnostic allegory. Guarino extends Burroughs' fragmentary novella into a psycho-spiritual odyssey, blending beat-era existential pain with metaphysical inquiry. There's a kind of fragmented editing and pace and anarchinistic Nirvana covers. Great scene, by the way, walking just down the street and he's come as you are, like, great scene. And ethereal Paris by night ambience from a dreamscape representing the psyche's liminal zones where Christ consciousness flickers in the unconscious depths. Christ, the Christos, what the yogis call the Atma, the soul's true signal and sense of I am presence, in the material world gets lost, especially when you try to overly satiate the ego's mind and body. 5. The final tension, death and rebirth. By the film's end, Lee becomes an old man, yet he still has these pineal gland dreams that collapse time. Allerton comforts him like a resurrected Christ, offering solace, perhaps symbolizing cyclical rebirth beyond temporal craving. Specifically, there's this scene where now he's an old man and he's laying in bed, and the world beyond the window is depicted as now in the future there's a plane flying over. It just feels, if he was 50 in 1950, then now he's, let's say, 90, and that must mean it's 1990. It looks like he's more modern. He's laying on this bed after this super mystical, like super shamanic dream sequence where he tries to shoot the glass off of Bro's head, but he domes him in the face. While he's laying in the bed as an old man, he's shivering, and this subconscious dream state flicker back to this moment where he was relapsing on their travels before they got to the jungle. There was this moment which, to me, as an observer of storytelling, but also as a storyteller, that's like a thesis moment where as a filmmaker and an actor, I love watching movies. I can't help but notice if this guy was writing something, where's the thesis point? And there was this other thesis point. I don't know if you remember when I said it, but it was like, boom, that was a thesis point. I should have marked what that was. Remember that? I'm glad you aren't. Can I say something real quick? There was a moment where I was like, that's a thesis point, and I don't remember what it was, but I should have wrote it down. Thesis points do stand out. Towards the end of the film is a thesis point where he has this memory of when his friend, lover boy, put his leg on top of his, and it was this moment that he'll never forget. And it was a moment where maybe he experienced not just love, in my opinion, but male love. This is a man who, in the 50s, probably does have tremendous father wounds and did not ever get male affection. This particular depiction of a man, elderly man, alone on his deathbed, it depicts him about to die, and he remembers this one moment where this young man put his leg on his, and he looks up, and it really took it in, and the filmmaker showed us that was an important moment, and that stuck with him for his whole life. And I feel like that was a thesis moment, that amongst all that seeking of sex and craving and even the ayahuasca, what really stood out to him in that last few moments of his life, that insignia, that iconography of love extended from one soul to another soul in a moment of need. The shot of Allerton shooting Lee in a dream holds decide meets transfiguration resonance. Ego must die for Christ consciousness to emerge. It's a mystical transcendence that operates at the confluence of beat nihilism and mystical pilgrimage. Daniel Craig's very raw, unguarded performance channels a kind of mystical Christ-like vulnerability imbued with the sin and the sanctity of living in the modern age. The film is really less about identity politics, although it starts off feeling like, and more about the dissolution of identity and the accumulative states of our social inherited sense of tribalism to awaken that universal consciousness through ritualized ego death. It's a kind of phantasmagoric, psycho-mystical opus, enigma-soaked in sweaty spiritual homesickness. Guarino's bravest, most metaphysical undertaking yet. The Sacred Yahe. Queer as alchemical Christ consciousness transmission, a mystical cinematic analysis. In Luca Guadagnino's psychedelic adaptation of William S. Burroughs' Queer, we witness Daniel Craig's William Lee journey from the cantinas of 1950s Mexico into the Ecuadorian rainforest seeking Yahe, plant medicine that promises telepathic communication with the unreachable beloved. What unfolds is far more of a beat-era quest narrative. This is a shamanic gospel of ego death, a visual sensual ayahuasca ceremony that dissolves the boundaries between the flesh and spirit, between the suffering ego body and the awakening Christ consciousness. The depiction of the ayahuasca ceremony is not 100% accurate, but it's also completely interpretive. There's probably a million different versions of what an ayahuasca ceremony looks like. One of my favorite parts about it is that it turned into this interpretive dancing. It was really beautiful and showed us what the hero was looking for, which was this divine union in the metaphysical and the physical. Although he framed it through this interest in telepathy, what we ended up seeing is his merger of that physical poetry and the sensual, romantic, high calling towards psychological merger, which is about deep understanding, the quality of Christ consciousness and coming on to your spiritual body out of third density into fourth and fifth density, which is what spiritual awakening is all about. What we're witnessing here isn't just a queer gay movie, it's mystical cinema, the kind that cracks open the pineal gland and lets the divine light pour through, hiding in plain sight through whatever the story happens to be. William Burroughs, as a kind of post-war prophet, William S. Burroughs wrote Queer between 1951 and 1953. Though it remained unpublished 30 years, a suppressed gospel of the disillusioned Western man, this was post-Hiroshima America, post-certainty, post-innocence. The old gods were dead, and the new ones hadn't quite yet arrived. And men like Burroughs found themselves wandering in that liminal space, geographically in Mexico, sexually in queer desire, morally conflicted, spiritually in chemical sacraments, potentially heroin, potentially cocaine, probably lots of liquor and constant smoking. The real Burroughs sought ayahuasca with Louis Marker in documenting his search for telepathic plant medicine in the Yahe letters. But Marker abandoned him in the Amazon, just as Allerton abandons Lee in Guadagnino's vision in this film called Queer. This isn't just about romantic heartbreak. It's an archetypical wound of separation, the cosmic loneliness that drives every mystic toward both dissolution and unity. The Beat generation wasn't America's first wave of spiritual refugees, fleeing the materialism of post-war prosperity towards Eastern mysticism, plant medicines, and alternative forms of expanded consciousness. Often the most uncompromising of them all, potentially, understood that the path to transcendence runs through the shadow. I don't know if he actually knew that at the time, but ends up what his kind of testimony ends up being about. Through addiction, through obsession, through the complete collapse of ego defenses and giving in to that craving of physical sensory satiation desires. The sacred masculine in crisis. Daniel Craig as wounded avatar. Daniel Craig's performance is nothing short of revelatory. I really loved it. I thought it was amazing. A complete shedding of his James Bond persona to embody the sacred masculine lost in its own shadow. Lee is this post-war American male who's stripped of his illusions, no longer the conquering hero, the hyper-masculine guy who's got it all together, no longer certain in his desires, or really in his own place in the cosmic order. Daniel Craig must have understood that Lee is chasing the removal of his self, the self that he loathes, because he represents the dying ego that refuses to surrender to the divine love. You watch him move through these Mexico City bars, the hunting predator and the wounded animal simultaneously. This is that Christ in the wilderness, maybe not yet fully realized, but on its way to it. But the wilderness is internal, mapped in needle tracks and tequila burns. The genius of what Daniel Craig portrays lies in how he embodies both the seeker and the obstacle that he is seeking. Both the seeker and the obstacle to seeking. Lee's obsessive pursuit of Allerton mirrors the ego's desperate attempt to possess what can only be received through surrender. He's trying to achieve this kind of union through willpower, through assertion, love through manipulation, playing all the old games. He's trying all of his own old tricks, transcendence through control, but it's another metaphor of that old paradigm dying hard. Queer as mystical state, beyond sexual identity. Let's be clear. When Allerton declares, "I'm not queer, I'm disembodied," he's not making a statement about sexual orientation, I don't think. He's articulating a Gnostic truth, a gnosis, a knowingness that is somewhere deep in his soul. It's the sense that queer in this film might not actually just be about being gay or homosexual, but really about this liminal state in between worlds, the dissolution of binary categories that mystics have always known. Queerness here is the third option. It's neither male nor female, not straight or gay. It's not really body, it's not really spirit, but the space between where transformation happens. Correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't really done too much studying on the etymology of it and the use of this word in pop culture, but I do believe I've heard people say that queer used to mean, or at least be used sometimes depending on the context, mean that someone was off a little bit before it got used to mean a particular sexual orientation. It is the sacred androgyny of alchemical texts in the past, potentially yogic tantra texts. The bodhisattva who refuses the final liberation until all beings are free. The Christ consciousness that transcends all human categories. I'm not saying that this character is the full realized savior shaman Christ or the full realized bodhisattva, but I'm saying in that archetypical reference of a soul who must go through that dissolution of their categorically clear identity. This is that. There are other characters look like NPCs. The one that is played by Jason Schwartzman, I wonder, is that a mask or did he put on actual weight for that? I thought that was actually a surprising rendition of Jason Schwartzman because I just saw him in the new Wes Anderson film, which I'm making a video about. Jason Schwartzman's character, at least in my metaphysical lensing, I see a character who has not yet been dominoed into the choice or chosen the choice or surrendered their ego and their time-based identity into the godlight of that eternal flame that must consume who you thought you were in order for you to be who you truly are. Often looks like an NPC, a non-playable character. What the Gen Z millennial kids keep saying, main character energy. The main character energy is what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey. That hero with 1,000 million infinite faces. The one who shows up, the chosen one, the only one. As actor Drew Droge observed, you just don't care much about binary normal ways of doing things, and you make your own rules. This is queerness as a spiritual practice. The refusal to be contained by consensus reality limitations. Whether you're just gay or bisexual, that's not the point. The ayahuasca initiation, cinematic plant medicine. The film's climactic sequence where Lee and Allerton take this ayahuasca beverage with Dr. Cotter in this cute little jungle setting in this Ecuadorian jungle becomes full-scale mystical transmission for anybody who's got the eyes to see. Guadagnino described it as the moment in the movie where they get synchronized and they become one. Synchronization with what? With each other? One with each other? One with everything? I think for our interpretation. The universal consciousness that underlies all apparent separation becomes, even just for a moment, visible. The sequence features the two men's bodies literally dissolving and fusing together in this choreographed dance that is beautifully done around this fire and in the jungle. This isn't just a hallucination or psychedelic trip. It is like the visual representation of what these spiritual and mystical pathways call unity. The direct experience of a non-dual, not two, awareness where subject and object, lover and beloved, self and other collapse and merge in their intertwining. Dr. Cotter's warning rings like a prophecy. Door's already open. Can't close it now. All you can do is look away. But why would you? It's like that Japanese koan, mystical, irreversible nature of the mystical awakening. Once you've tasted unity consciousness, the separate self can never really reconstitute its old illusions. But there's a kind of cosmic joke in that. Even the moment of perfect unity, Allerton's voice tells Lee, despite what they've encountered, despite what they've experienced, he's not queer. The ego's final defense to make separation, even make transcendence another form of abandonment. Time, memory, and the eternal return. The film's epilogue descends into a series of dreamlike vignettes that collapse temporal boundaries. Lee as both young seeker and old man, past and future converging in the eternal now of expanded consciousness. The Doll House sequence, very cool, very meta. He's definitely in a dream state. Really reminded me of Synecdoche, New York. Trippy, Philip Seymour Hoffman. See it if you haven't. Lee peers into a miniature replica of his own room, representing this kind of recursive nature of consciousness examining itself. His big eyes looking through the hallway, and then you see the Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, representing that eternal cycle of seeking, finding, losing, and seeking again. When Lee encounters the snake formed in an infinity symbol on the floor when he walks in this bedroom, and then the snake sheds a tear. We're witnessing the cosmic sadness of separation within unity, the divine loneliness that drives all creation. I feel like Daniel Craig interpreted this as some kind of extension of the ayahuasca trip that we never can quite leave, and I believe he figured something out because how he depicted it, it's like once consciousness has been cracked open, ordinary reality is just another dream within the cosmic dream. The film's most enigmatic sequence, arguably, shows Lee shooting a glass balanced on his lover's head, a reference to William Burroughs' accidental killing of his wife, Joan Vollmer, in a drunken William Tell-style game. But in this mystical context of the film, this becomes something a little bit more profound. Lee's face after the shooting suggests that he's freed of the love that's emotionally paralyzed him for years, but not freed from that cruelty of the act, freed through the recognition that the separate self, the ego that suffers and clings and tries to possess something, has to die for that eternal true self, Christos consciousness, to actually be born and come forth. This is that gnosis, the Gnostic teaching, hidden in plain sight. The person that you think you are must be shot in the face, in the head, in the pineal gland for the person that you truly are to emerge. It is violent because ego death is violent. And it's also liberating because what dies was never really real to begin with. So it's just the illusion crumbling, which is a bit of a violent thing, and all of the psychological tethers have to fall. Cinematic alchemy, Guadagnino's visual mysticism. The director Director Guadagnino worked with cinematographer Sayambu Mukdipram, I'm definitely not getting that right, Trent Reznor, and Atticus Ross to create what can only be described as a visual ayahuasca and beautiful sonic score. The film's color palette, those separated reds and the olive greens, they create this beautiful, otherworldly atmosphere that exists outside the normal time. The anachronistic use of Nirvana and New Order alongside period jazz creates a kind of temporal vertigo that mixes us up as to where we are and mirrors the consciousness expanding disorientation effects of the plant medicine soon to come. When Come As You Are plays over Daniel Craig's characters just walking down the street of 1950s Mexico, but we're not really. We're in this eternal realm where all music and all longing and all seeking converges. Reminds me of the film Sinners, which I have a cool video essay on that as well if you want to check that out. But that incredible scene in Sinners where obviously this is a period piece, but there's a scene where characters from other times are appearing. And this is a mechanism. It's like an artist's choice. They're allowed to do it. There's a term for it. It's a colloquialism. Like an artist has the tool to do what they want. But anyways, whatever I'm trying to say, it's basically cool as fuck when Daniel Craig's character walking down the street and Come As You Are plays, which doesn't come out until the 1990s, and this is depicted in the 1950s, but it's a universal feeling. It's a universal theme, just like what happened in Sinners in the juke joint scene where they're all dancing and there's like characters from different eras showing up. It's because it's a universal, eternal, timeless, non-temporal moment. It's a mechanism and a tool for a storyteller to do the shamanic thing with their story. It's not just a story of nothing. It's the story of spirit navigating the physical world. Every single time that happens, a soul is navigating one thing, their evolution. That's all there really is to navigate, our own evolution. So we're watching Daniel Craig's evolution, and it's pretty cool. And this director, Guadagnino, which I'm not really familiar with, I hope I'm getting his name close. Read or saw Luca Guadagnino cited something about Francis Bacon's work on animality and Flemish painter Michael Borman's as visual reference for the jungle sequences. These are visual artists who understood that to paint the soul, you must first strip away the comfortable lies of the surface reality. The eternal wound and the deathless. To me, queer is really about this cosmic wound that drives every mystical being, that recognition that in this realm of apparent separation, perfect love remains forever just out of reach. For any intellectual person, at a certain point you realize that vehicle of the mind will never get you to the thing that you're seeking. It's a texture, it's a taste, it's a love, it's ultimately some form of love. And we see this intellectual writer man, gay guy, drinking guy, now he's in Mexico. What is he really looking for? He's looking for wholeness, looking for completion, fulfillment, satisfaction of some kind, categorically. And I think that's true for pretty much all of us. Not because we're not worthy, but because that we that seeks is precisely that which must dissolve for the true love that is the ultimate satisfaction to be realized and known. Lee's obsession with Allerton in this film is every soul's obsession with the divine beloved, with God, with the divine, however you want to describe that. And also pretty much how all of our egos get when we get consumed by something that looks like a distraction maybe, looks like an obstacle. It is my testimony and how my teachers have taught me that if anything arrives on your path, it is your teacher. So especially addiction is really a neural pathway signaling to you that if you stay in this place, you'll be safe. But what it's going to end up doing is it's going to burn out that train track on the neural pathway, and eventually you're going to lose all traction there, and it will lead to a bigger breakdown than it would as if you were to just leave it or abandon it or get out sooner. But in this one, as you can see, it's a story of a guy who's kind of looking for the next hit or fix. They end up going to a doctor and he tries to play it off like he's got dysentery, but he really just wants some opium. His guides are guiding him perfectly towards that which he needs to have his identity unraveled to get to the truth of the truest love that he can ever know in this life. His journey to find this Yahe is every spiritual seeker's journey towards the medicine that will heal the wound of all separation in their life. His abandonment in the jungle is every mystical journey's dark night of the soul. Even the beloved becomes another form of exile. Even that place that we thought was about to save us, it abandoned us too, because there's one more layer to surrender to. But there's a kind of secret teaching hidden in Guadagnino's visual poetry. The wound and the healing are the same. They're one, they're paired, can't disconnect them. The seeker and what is being sought are also the lover and the beloved are also. The ayahuasca sequence shows us that in a really cool visual way. The bodies literally merging into each other where it looks like the bro's knuckles is under the dude's arm. It's like a really cool, whoever choreographed that definitely got paid. The door is already open, can't close it now. Not just for Lee, but for anyone who's truly witnessed what is in this film's mystical transmission. You can't unsee the recognition that what we call love is often just the ego wearing ceremonial dressings and robes. You can't unknow know that what we call separation is just consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. Queer is one of Guadagnino's most amazing films because it does not show you queerness only. It initiates you into the liminal space where all categories dissolve, into the recognition that the spiritual path isn't just about becoming someone new, but something new, about dying to who you thought you were. Daniel Craig's Lee doesn't just find telepathic communion with Allerton through the Yahe. He finds ayahuasca, he finds the jungle, and something far more devastating and beautiful, that recognition that he was never separate from the beloved to begin with. The cosmic joke is that what we seek through others can only be found by dissolving the seeker itself. That is the story of Christ consciousness coming online psychosomatically. That is shamanic cinema and filmmaking. This is what happens when you point a camera directly at the divine loneliness that drives every human heart towards seeking what they feel like will make them whole. You keep filming until the wound becomes the doorway. That is where the light enters. The ayahuasca ceremony continues long after the credits roll. The question isn't whether you're ready for it. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit that you've already begun. Man, watch this film if you're into this kind of stuff, or if you're just looking for a good movie. Whether you're watching this movie and you think, oh, it's queer, it's about a gay guy. It's yes and way more, which is just dope. It's amazing. Enjoy this film if you feel called to watch it. Let it change you. Let it crack something open that was meant to be cracked, and let the light move through that crack. Let Daniel Craig's performance show you what a holy desperation really looks like. I think it's a good depiction of it. Let that jungle sequence remind you that ayahuasca may be calling you. There are medicines for wounds that you might not have known even existed, and there might be a healing for a wound that you didn't know you had, and the door's already open. You can't close it. All you can do is look away, but why would you? The ceremony has already begun. My name's Rocco. Thanks for tuning in. I make music and film and fashion, and I love doing these metaphysical film reviews. Hit the subscribe button and tell me what your thoughts are in the comment section. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Sending you much love. Namaste.